This story begins with a letter. Dear Grandma and Grandpa, we have made it. We're in Turkey. In fact, we're on a tour of Istanbul with a guide who's extolling us on the generosity of the Turkish people. We would never persecute anyone, never turn anyone away. And I can feel my face react. It's this face. The face people make when they taste something rancid or, these days, see a Cybertruck. I feel your presence with me in these moments, so I try to keep myself neutral. So, depending on who I tell, their understanding of the situation predicts their reaction. Most people have only known Turkey as a vacation destination, right? So they get excited to tell me about their experiences. And I feel this kind of like burden of apology. Like, sorry, man, I have to burst your bubble. These people murdered my family. Am I Inigo Montoya? You killed my father. Prepare to die. And this is the struggle, right? Like, how much do I tell you about my past? So many countries have dark pasts, including the US. It actually serves them in some way to move forward as if it never happened and not teach history. And it's annoying that I also understand that aspect. But this trip isn't just some vacation. It's a political act. And that sounds like hyperbole, but it's true. I'm here for my grandparents to come back, to take up space in their homeland, partly for the sake of the fact that they could never return. So, Grandpa, I try to fix my face. Fascinated. Stoic even. Yes. And I'm keeping our identity as Armenians secret, as you kind of taught us to do. And it seems unfortunately unnecessary now. We're erased, forgotten. The story is altered, the stitching is ripped out, and even the direction of the fabric has changed. The boys, my two sons, they are ages 15 and 17. They definitely caught my face. They are astute observers. But they also know our story. They know why we're here and why we're undercover in Turkey. We are learning about how apparently the Turks invented everything, made all the art. The tour guide apparently is also trying to get us to buy things from his friends. We even go to a rug store and they try to sell us Turkish rugs. I know, it's funny to listen to someone tell you a history that you know isn't true. And look, I use the term Turks, but this is a universal story. So, I don't know, insert whatever name of a victorious group there. My family, and there are two very different sides, but either way, we have never been a part of any history of winning. And the victorious like to take credit for everything. You know what I mean? Still, here I am, and I'm looking for signs everywhere. I look into people's eyes. I notice familiar faces right away. There are photos of that man's exact mustache and fez on the wall of my father Harry's house. Immediately, of course, I assume the kind eyes are Armenian, their grandmothers, great-grandmothers, stolen and converted, hiding their identity their whole lives. These are the children of these displaced people. Maybe we share a familiar nod or a look. So, you know that rug store I mentioned? After my grandfather got to America, he eventually started a rug business in Manhattan. So to listen to this man tell me about rugs is blasphemous. He talks about the knots and the importance of the number of knots. And oh, look at the bottom of the rug. These details were part of our language growing up, to know about rugs. And I feel a little nauseous listening to his sales pitch. Can you imagine these rugs in your home? What kind of floors do you have? And then we all share a look again. Yeah, guy, we know. And this keeps happening on our trip. Moments of this possession or repossession. Is it a Turkish rug or a Turkish food, a Turkish coffee? Or is it actually Armenian coffee? I do have this question, you see, as an artist. what is homeland? Where are my roots? Where do I belong on the earth? And Grandpa, I had this idea to go to your village of Chumlaku, to see it. Not just to see it, but to satisfy my own curiosity in a way. What is it like to love a place so much that you dedicate a huge part of your life to honoring it? I envy that. I also wanted to bring back soil from the land to your grave. Maybe give your soul a little peace to temper your yearning for that place, maybe. And all these severed but deep cellular parts of us began to swirl in my own head and twirl out onto the canvas with paint. I think you would appreciate it as a rug man. The patterns of the rugs that you sold that cover all the floors of our homes. My favorites are the ones with the broken borders, not super angled. They were a little more wild, and you saw a little more of the playful artist in there. But this familiar art of pattern and design and the warmth of too many colors and patterns together has imprinted into my brain. They all remake themselves onto the canvas in curls of colors and light. And when I work, it feels subconscious, free, spontaneous. The meaning doesn't always reveal itself immediately, but then I step back and realize it's remaking these patterns. So I've made art that has been in direct conversation with you and the influence of pattern without even knowing it until I step back and look. But in order to pass these stories on, I tell my sons on our side of the family, and we're both Armenian and Jewish, of course, and they are very different tribes, but they had similar fates, and we have no homeland anymore, not as Jews or as Armenians. And I want to help them find more roots, maybe by healing some of these old wounds of yours. I don't know. But I'm here to tell you, not having roots or homeland makes people a little unhinged. Being a grandchild of all these refugees turns out to be a real challenge on all these primal parts of the brain. Each offshoot person takes it on in a different way. And needless to say, I was a weird kid. My Jewish grandparents were scrappy as hell. No one had time for anyone, for nurturing. They were defiant, loud. They took up space, despite being full of fear, and had no patience for any rules. My Jewish grandfather would literally just drive off the highway if he saw traffic. No map. He was convinced that moving, even in the wrong direction, was better than sitting still. And on the other side, the Armenian immigrants who were so full of fear, they didn't want to make any waves. They were quiet. But underneath, there was a rage. And all of us offshoots, we all try to move with these new tides and figure out our own way, I guess. I think they may call that mental illness. But I really, Grandpa, don't want to pass on this unhingedness. So anyway, in New York, we have the Jews. In Brooklyn, the Armenians and Queens. We are in New Jersey, shuttling between the two almost every weekend. I'm the youngest of 4 girls, and despite being surrounded by people, I kind of slide under the radar, quite feral. I would arrive in Queens to the Armenian house with a purse full of stolen candy because my Jewish grandmother told me the bins of candy in the grocery store were there for the pickings. Just take the candy. My diet-obsessed mother kept no candy or dessert in the house, so I would hide these stolen treats until the right moment in the car on the way to Queens, in the way back of the station wagon. I'd eat candy after candy, almost to the beat of exit signs passing by. We'd arrive, me high on sugar and chocolate on my face, running in and out of the house. I think my Armenian grandparents were just so happy to be alive and in a comfortable home that we could be covered in mud and they would be grateful to be surrounded by life. And you know, the furniture was covered in plastic anyway, so. But this idea has been in my head for years now. How to get back to your villages, to step foot back into Turkey, to do what you were not able to do, to return, to have that connection to the land again. I did feel a glimpse of it in Jerusalem, not just because of the Jewish side of the family, but yours too. I was there for a friend's wedding, and walking the ancient streets, I felt my bones were familiar there. There is comfort in the familiar faces for the first time, and I wanted to find that again. But here in Turkey, we're just tourists now. I'm not a confrontational person. Hiding is in my DNA. You would be proud of how we assimilate. But, people look at my face and ask, where are you really from? And I have to explain. I am Armenian from Turkey and Jewish from what's now the Ukraine. Oh, you're from Armenia. No, I'm from Turkey. Oh, so your family's there. No. And I have to explain some history to you. They were forced out in 1915 by the new Turkish government. They worked to exterminate the Armenians in Turkey in order to achieve a singular Turkish identity. At least 1 million people died, marched off the land. Oh, and they deny this ever happened. I love Turkey. I went there on vacation. We were on a boat. I don't know what to say to this, Grandpa. We have a complicated relationship to it. We also wish we could be free and love enthusiastically, but they murdered our family. And this was our family's home for thousands of years. How long do we keep bringing up the past, even if it makes people annoyed and uncomfortable? Anyway, so my grandfather's family were forced marched out of their villages for hundreds of miles, packed on a train, marched again. My grandfather, exhausted, starving. One of his brothers died in his arms, the other one on the road. And they also watched their father die in the desert on the way to Syria. And when they arrived in Syria, his mother and sisters convinced an orphanage to take them all in, exchanging work for beds, caring for the sick and dying children there. And across the Black Sea, almost at the same time, this is happening to my Jewish relatives in Ukraine. They were escaping the pogroms there. A pogrom is where they round up and kill Jews. Really, anyone they deemed as different. My heritage is kind of based on being rejected and ejected. Genocide and Holocaust on both sides. I met a woman at a party once. The subject of, where are you from? Of course, came up. And after she announced she was from Turkey, I excitedly said, oh, me too, but I'm Armenian. And she looked at me and rolled her eyes and said, you Armenians really have to get over this whole genocide thing. We leave Istanbul and we board a plane to Kayseri in Turkey, ever closer to your villages. As the plane touched down, peering out the window, I whispered, we made it to you. I felt so excited to be experiencing this moment, this monumental event. Our Armenian family in Turkey again. Yet, the universe does not work in mysterious ways that make beautiful sense to me. The feeling I most feel is disjointed, disorganized, out of body, floating above, which is normal, I guess. But I want to be stronger. I've been waffling on everything. My husband's taking the lead. My mind has been annoyingly passive. I'm naming his energy tall white guy energy. As long as they don't colonize, right? We'll move in the shadow of it. People had warned me, get a guide. Don't get a guide. They're all scammers. You'll need a translator. The roads are hard to navigate. The people in the villages are suspicious. Nonsense. We have rented a car. So yes, I grew up in both New Jersey and New York City from the early 70s through the 2000s. Quick to respond, head on a swivel, always looking for danger. My husband, he grew up in upstate New York, peaceful woods and birds. I literally fished for garbage in the local pond. I called it can fishing. He fished for fish. You would think that I would be brave in these situations, but I'm not. Country boy doesn't hesitate in these moments. He strides ahead. Grandpa, you'll be happy to know, no more tour guides. Now it's us on our own. My husband's family calls him the cruise director. And in these moments, I have signed up for the day's events. The first stop are these ancient homes you lived near. They call them now open-air museums. And we discover the domiciles and churches carved into the ash and lava-formed rock. The rock looks like the wet sand drip spires the boys would make at the beach, and it stretches for miles. And here we are. I see it. I want to share it with you. The vista stretches flat with these spires popping up. In the stories you and your surviving siblings would tell us, there were caves to explore, to sleep and hide in, and I could never quite picture that. Caves everywhere? I had no reference point. But seeing these peaks with carved cells in the soft rock over and over throughout the landscape, it all made sense. We climb around in freedom, in and out of these caves, the boys scrambling in one opening and out the other. Check this out, and sick! Their excited voices come from within, and they notice little details I miss, like that roadway sign riddled with bullets, and the grindstones for making flour, the cats peeping out. And I can see the hands that carved these walls. The kitchens are obvious. The walls are black with soot from the fires for cooking. Many shelves where I imagine herbs, fruits, meats were dried and stored. In some, there were faint paintings, circles with designs and crosses painted with red ochre. You can see the designs, kind of like rug patterns on the walls. Over those, you see intricate frescoes made by the small Christian communities that live there, and then the obvious gashes to try and wipe them away. So they were carving these small churches into the rock, and these delicate, detailed frescoes were in every group of cave dwelling. We even saw one from the road. Just pull over, pick your way through the dirt, and walk up, no signs. Apparently, these frescoes depict an unusual sequence, different from the regular narrative because of these isolated locations. And despite their isolation, the Turkish government came through and chiseled away at these ancient paintings, trying to eradicate any trace of the groups that lived there. While I am not religious, sorry, Grandma, I am an artist. And seeing these beautiful, intricate portraits of saints with rude scrapes and scratches across their faces and bodies, which brings the story of the erasure of us Armenians even more into focus, was upsetting. And Grandma, we only saw glimpses of the old parts of the city where you were. In the same way I'm taking in Grandpa's family's death march, I'm also thinking of the sudden shock of your father's disappearance. So they murdered the Armenian cultural leaders in like a sweep. Anyone in upper level jobs first and quickly. My grandmother's father was one of those in the first wave. He bought supplies for the school in Talas and was part of the local government. And it all happened so fast that no one really knew what was happening. It was easy to get confused. So the night the government sent that trusted friend to your father with news that the mayor wanted to see him, he went without hesitation, right? He had no idea there was anything to fear yet. He wanted to impress this man, but was so rushed he forgot his watch and actually came back home to grab it. And that watch probably ended up on the wrist of some Turkish soldier after he shot him. He had told your mother, "I will never die before I kill 10 men. So, of course, she was convinced he would stay alive. He was a strong man. But no one can fight the dedicated, systematic destruction of a people. So he didn't return home for days, which turned into weeks. My grandmother's family was forced out of their home and into hiding in a shack in the hills, living on top of accumulated furniture and household things. A stranger, this woman they called the Lady Turkez, came with good news from my grandmother's mother, Maritza. Her husband was still alive, and this woman's brother was hiding him in a nearby village. A miracle. The Lady Turkez said he had been spared. Maritza was convinced her strong husband had survived and believed these explanations. Turkez made up story after story and basked in the family's attention and took anything of value in exchange for her lies. Once there was no more to take, she disappeared. Defeated and afraid, the family managed to escape to Beirut, Lebanon. When I think about how to return to roots or express myself on the canvas to feel grounded, somehow I think of these moments, the ripped up root, the floating parts, the memories, the draw of longing, the betrayals, all of that. The places where you were and did not want to leave, the pride in building a home, passing of time, hurtling through space. I make paintings that I think evoke that feeling. Also the feeling of getting lost in patterns for comfort. And on a cellular level, I think my work represents the displacement of these cells, the division, the migration, and maybe the transformation.